Welcome again to a very captivating episode of the Black Powder Podcast, where we talk about liberty, liberty matters, and liberty facts. I am your host, the only real libertarian, Marcus Matthews, and as usual, I'm joined by one of my DEI hires, Eric Parker, Bold Liberty, formerly of Duval, but now he is coming at us from North Kakalaki. Eric, my good man, how are you feeling this evening?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, man?
I'm just happy to be here. I just want to let everybody know that I've marked myself safe from the riots and everything, so you don't have to worry about me. And today's episode is brought to you by the letter G and the number 21. So we're going to,
I wish they were paying us. Hey,
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Shout out.
Hey, shout out to Gaston, man. Holla at your boy. We're over here ready to do some sponsorship stuff, so we truly appreciate it if you give us a holler on that.
Hey, Austria, we like your pistols and we like your economics. Let's roll.
Let's roll, homie. Now, today we have an interesting episode because we have sort of the dual threat of the Libertarian Party. Both somebody that works with the National Committee and somebody who won a local election in their hometown. Now, I mentioned to him backstage that I think it was back in 2016. I remember when Spike Cohen was the VP candidate. I remember asking him, what is it going to take for the Libertarian? Was that 2020?
Well, yeah, I don't know when he started campaigning, but that was 2020.
It was 2016.
Gary Johnson and Bill Weld, I think.
That's right. My bad, homies. That was 2020.
Fact check, live fact check on the spot.
Yeah, here we go. Eric the liberal with his fact checking. At any rate, I asked Spike, what's it going to take for the Libertarian Party to make waves? He said, we have to start doing it at the local level. And that's because he said we have to show that we can govern at the local level, and by governing means leaving you alone. It will help put the Libertarian Party in a better placement as far as in the minds of Americans when they think of the duopoly and whatnot. So, without further ado, I want to introduce to you our distinguished guest, Mr. Ben DeJong from the village of Lake Odessa, Michigan. What's the official title? Trustee?
Yep, Village Council Trustee.
Village Council Trustee. Welcome aboard, my good man.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
so,
Ben, real quick, the last name DeJong, what's that?
It's actually Dutch, so it's actually pronounced DeJong.
DeJong.
So many different spellings, and but this is the OG spelling.
Well, when I saw it before meeting you, I was like, "Oh, we're having an Asian guy on," but no.
I've been usually people think that when they see the name and then they see the face, they're like, "Do we have the right guy?"
Yeah.
Well, could have been adopted. I don't know.
I'm going to continue to ebonically pronounce your last name, so forgive me in advance.
No worries. Hasn't been the first time, won't be the last.
No. So it's DeJong.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'll try to remember that. I'm terrible with names. I was working with two contractors today. Came up, looked them right in the eye, shook their hands. They told me their names. I couldn't tell you their names right now if somebody had a gun to my head. And I worked with them for about 6 hours today. So,
like, what's up, fellas?
Hey guys, you done yet? Okay. But first of all, congratulations on your electoral victory. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and what happened and how you got to this point?
Sure thing. So, kind of my libertarian roots. I've been actively involved in the state party of Michigan for going on 6 years. I am the communications director for the state party. I'm also chair of the Capital Area Affiliate, which is kind of the Lansing area. And I also serve on the executive committee. So, libertarians, we love to wear a lot of hats. It's a small party and we kind of have to carry extra loads. So, but it's been really exciting, especially this year. We had 3 people elected to local positions in Michigan, which was huge. Awesome. I appreciate, you talking about Spike and that message of winning locally. I can't stress that enough. the idea that we think that we can have a Joe Schmo off the street all of a sudden elected to governor or secretary of state is just insane. And that's what we've been trying for too long. So to be able to win local races now. So for example, for me, I actually served on the village planning commission for a year before running for office for the village council. So that's a good example of something that I really try to enforce, especially with libertarians, to say, sometimes you just got to start with an appointed position. There's a lot of openings out there for whether it's village, planning commission or downtown development authorities, or it's kind of like building a resume. You don't just jump in to be CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You got to work your way up.
Right.
And that's, I think, so important in the liberty movement. And part of me thinks that there's just a lot of libertarians that love to be keyboard warriors, but they really don't want to hold office. And so it's perfectly fine to run for an office that you're never going to get. But it's a lot more challenging to run for an office that you have a good chance of getting. And then you're stuck actually having to, fulfill the message and actually put actions to, what we've been talking about for years. So a couple of examples I can give right off the bat. On the Village Planning Commission, we had an ordinance that prevented tattoo parlors in the village of Lake Odessa. And I really helped instrument getting that removed. We had somebody that really wanted to open up a tattoo parlor and was able to get that ordinance removed. And the tattoo parlor has been thriving. I mean, I think within 6 months, she had to hire 2 other tattoo artists because she's been doing so well. And so that's something small but impactful. I mean, it's a local business. It's another offering that's available in the village. And that's the kind of work that libertarians can do in local elections.
All politics are local, right?
It should be. And then that's where, like, I would love to see yard sign. I don't want to see Trump. I want to see, who's running for local, village president or your city council, or that should be where people's heads are at, and not in DC or even in the state capitals.
And I'll always kind of tried making that point during election season. Like, I don't think a Trump or a Harris sign in someone's front yard changed anyone's decision or mind on who they're going to vote for. Like, oh, look, this guy is voting for, now I got to vote for him. But whenever you're running for a small local position and maybe no one's heard of you, or, you were appointed, maybe some people have heard of you and some haven't, that's a great way. Like, I think yard signs definitely work for local. Now, they're not everything. And if you put your sign next to an obvious Republican sign and you're running in a majority Democrat area, that might not be a good strategy, if that makes sense. So sometimes you kind of got to be careful. But yeah, totally. I guess I wanted to ask, like, how long were you on the appointed position before you ran or decided to run for local? And was that your intention? Let me get in an appointed position. I'm going to hold that down for a while, and then I'm going to run for something local.
Yeah, the appointed position of the village council or planning commission was a year. And it was kind of a, let's test the waters and see, what impact I can make. And if I wanted to pursue, then, again, it's kind of building name recognition. And so last time around, we had actually 3 open seats on the village the village council. And there was 5 candidates running. So it was relatively a contested race. Now, it was nonpartisan, but at the same time, I wear my libertarian proudly. And I think the great thing is, because we're not Democrat, we're not Republicans. So it really gives us a lot of breath to flex that muscle to say, hey, I'm a libertarian. And it starts a lot of conversations. Well, what's a libertarian? What makes you different than, Republican or Democrat? And it takes away that the edge of, blue or red. And so people can be a lot more receptive to you, even if they're coming from one of those 2 camps, because you're not the other camp. We've been so partisan in the United States of us versus them. And it's definitely it's a way for us to interject and to say we're something different.
Right. We got our first
Definitely.
comment of the night from We Love the State podcast. Love the name. Proudly
Yep.
not a real libertarian.
That's my actually that's my co-host on my podcast.
Well, let me tell your co-host something. I'm the only real libertarian, so you can't even go there and say probably not a real libertarian, because only one real libertarian can exist at any given time and space. And I will take on a Padawan, whatever the Sith version of a Padawan is. I saw you had some Star Trek stuff up on your page, and I want you to know this is a Star Wars based podcast, and we will not have any Star Trek shenanigans here, just in case that's part of your personality. But
No nerds, huh?
speaking of personality, I want to know what was your message, and how did you frame it to win your election? Because the village of Lake Odessa is not a big place. It seems like a lot of people would probably know that it was probably like 1 to 2 degrees of separation as far as who knows who in an area like that. What was your messaging and the interpersonal stuff that you got across to the voters?
Yeah, so I had quite a few conversations with people. And one of the big things that I heard is there just wasn't a lot of transparency. And so one of the things that I kind of did right off the bat was kind of looked at Justin Amash's model of explaining every vote on social media. So I created my own Facebook page, and I post in our community connection for the Lake Odessa Village. A lot of times I'll post the agenda coming up and say, does anybody have questions or concerns on any of the agenda items? And then after each meeting, I always post, this is what occurred, this is how I voted, and explained why I voted the way I did. And I've gotten a lot of great positive feedback on that, because it's not, surprisingly, it's not been done before. I think a lot of government agencies of any size, they think that it's, people's duty to go to the website and read the meeting minutes if they want to be informed. And it's like, I don't think that's necessarily serving the people. Sometimes you have to go to them, as opposed to always, assume that they have to come to you. And that's kind of one of the things that I've done that really has separated myself from a lot of the other village council members is I like to go to events. I like to shake hands. I like to answer questions. I want people to know that, who I am, because I'm representing them. And I think that's one of the things that has been sometimes a little tougher is, I have my principles, but if I have a wave of individuals saying you really need to push in this direction, even though maybe I want to go in a different direction, it does kind of challenge you as a principled libertarian to say, should you be voting your conscience, or should you be voting the way that your constituents want to vote? And I think sometimes even just looking at, even Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, some of the greats, maybe it's, there are times where they say things, or they, vote a certain way that you're just like shaking your head going, I know you don't believe that, but maybe their excuse is, well, that's, 90% of my constituents and I have to represent them. So it does kind of open, you do have to kind of tackle that in an elected position.
I don't think any Democrat or Republican does that. Not to the extent where it would be meaningful for the voters. I think they get their votes. They go to the state capitals in Washington, D.C. And oftentimes I say this, every industry, every enterprise, every interest in America has a lobbyist in your state capitals and Washington, D.C., except the American people. We don't have any representation, because once they get there, they become these elitists that, you'll write them a letter and then they'll sing you a thank you for reaching out to me. I share your concerns. And, if we have to make an impactful statement, if you could just donate $15, $20 to my super PAC, we can get more stuff done for you. And it's auto signatures, little copy signature. It's one of their staffers that sent it back to you. But if you gave their campaign $100,000, you could walk in there and sit down with that person and tell them, hand over a bill that you think they should introduce into Congress. And that's how, you know, back in the day when watching I'm Only a Bill, you know, those cartoons that try to explain that type of stuff. And
Schoolhouse Rock.
that's a refreshing approach. I have to say, I'm very impressed with you already, just based on that.
And to kind of piggyback off that, like, how would your constituents reach out to you? Like, I guess if you shared the agenda on your social media, did you get messages on your social media or in your email, or did they call your office, or did you have like community town hall meetings, that sort of thing? If there was a big bill coming up, maybe something that you had an idea, like my constituents feel a certain way, I feel this way. I want to explain to them how I feel, but I want to hear from them also. How would you wrestle with that?
Yeah, so we had a couple weeks ago, we had kind of a contentious, there were some ordinances in additions to some local ordinances that I was not very, I wasn't a big fan of. They were very vague. So for example, one was, you know, if there was missing rocks or stucco or cracks in, you know, it was general, like a cleanliness of property, but it didn't specify, is it, you know, is it one brick or is half the side of your house falling down? And so I kind of pushed back and I said, I think it's up to us to be as specific as possible, because if we're going to cite people and then fine them up to potentially putting a lien on their property, we should be very specific on what the failure is. And I was the only no vote, and everybody else voted for that ordinance. And so I did kind of get into it on Facebook afterwards, where I posted my concerns and why I voted no. And there was a really, really good dialogue of comments and back and forth. And so it was kind of like that, you know, the social media town square where, you know, a lot of people were able to chime in and say, thank you so much for standing up against this. And, but at the same time, you know, you try to also be diplomatic, because I don't necessarily want to throw, you know, the rest of the village council under the bus and say, you know, how ridiculous they are. But something that I learned, you know, libertarians like to argue our principles. And we actually had the Libertarian National Convention or Committee in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a couple weekends ago, and Larry Sharp was there, and he was one of the speakers. And I got to talk to him a little bit and just say, you know, this is what happened to me, and I feel it kind of sucks because maybe I didn't message it right. And he really said, you know, libertarians like to argue facts and figures, and what you really need to argue is feeling. And so he's like, if you have that, you know, run into something like that again, you need to probably talk more about who could that hurt, and kind of do a little bit better job of storytelling to say, you know, that widow whose husband just died, she doesn't have the money to, you know, to fix her garage. And we're going to put her into bankruptcy. You know, that's, you know, what he suggested. And that was a great kind of learning moment for me. And it's great that we have those people in the liberty movement that can, you know, you can ask those questions to, and they can be great resources.
Yeah. Larry was on here a few weeks ago, and he was very insightful, and that was a great thing. I wanted to ask you, was your election at large, or like, what do they call it, district? As far as, was it just basically top three vote getters got the seats?
You had to pick who you were voting for. So my name was on the ballot, and people actually had to check my name. So it wasn't a top three vote total. It was, you know, the top three people that you selected. Yeah.
Gotcha. So there was one opening, and how many people were running?
Well, there was 3 openings, and there was 5 people that were vying for it.
Gotcha. So that's what 3 openings there. So it sounds like they're at large. They're not like specific districts, or is there a residential requirement?
There was a residential requirement. So you had to live within the village limits, and just to get your name on the ballot, you had to have, I think, and this is a low bar, but I believe it was 11 confirmed signatures from local people in the
within
village.
The district.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So one thing if I'm sorry, Eric, if I can expand on Larry's point a little bit, because I think one of the problems with the libertarian messaging is other people have defined it, and most people defined it as lacking humanity, so to speak. And when we don't say, "Hey, look, this is what we care about," like you need to be specific on this ordinance because of that old lady or because of the disabled war veteran that's living off of VA pension and whatnot. You know, how do we have a human touch to their particular problem instead of the, quote unquote libertarian sink or swim mentality that so many people think that we actually believe?
Yeah, you definitely. I think we'd have to do a better job of, especially those in messaging roles, is to kind of take a step back and not just shoot from the hip, but almost kind of plan out, like, what points do I want to hit? Who am I actually trying to talk to, and where are they at? Instead of just kind of, again, the autistic, like, well, Thomas Sowell said, or, it's, quoting, Mises or Hayek. That's not going to move the needle. More often than not, you're probably going to lose people when you kind of go down that that road.
Well, that's what kind of reminds. I shared a comment or a speech from Javier Milei recently, and he said something like, us heartless libertarians just lifted so many millions of people out of poverty in 1 year just by limited government, economic freedom, and individual liberty. You know what I mean? Those three things. But we are, I guess the stereotype is that we're selfish and we don't care, but it's like, actually, we care about the individual more than most, or the government does in most cases. You know what I mean?
And let me ask. I'm sorry, Ben. Can I ask? What did you think about what Javier Milei said? What was your opinion on Eric? What Eric just said? I'm sorry, Eric, but I had to get that in.
Yeah, I think the great thing with Javier is he is a libertarian. He does, he does talk and he says the right things, but he is emotional. He's not robotic. He's up there, like, he gets sweaty, and you can, the veins start popping out when he's passionate. And so he's using the kind of like in the libertarian language, but he's doing it in a much more like, I love my people, and we need to make a change, and the change, and you're really selling the fact that government's the problem. We've looked too much at government to be the solution, and yet the problem gets bigger and bigger. Exactly. And so that's, on a huge stage like that, I mean, talk about a huge win just for the liberty movement. We actually have a person that we can point to and say, look, it works. We aren't fringe. We aren't special. This is something that it clearly works, and it can do it pretty fast, which is crazy to, if you have somebody as brave as he is, to turn a country around. And I really hope that we don't get to a point of an Argentina level where, inflation's at like 150%, and, the unemployment is like 20% of your country. I mean, it sucks that it took them to that level of corruption in government to finally elect somebody who's willing to turn the ship around. But sometimes you have to feel it hard for you to realize government's not the solution.
Eric?
Yeah, so this might not have applied in your case, but I guess if someone's running for a local position similar to yours during their campaign, what should their main focus be? I know in most politics, everyone says the candidate's job is to raise money. Did that apply in your case? How important was it? And if it wasn't that important, what was important?
I think the networking for local elections is probably one of the most important things, is getting out into the community, going to events. I handed out yard signs. I paid for them myself. It's like $100 to get 50 yard signs. Local businesses that want to promote you, people that are just frustrated with the current state, or just the this is how we've always done it. And you kind of have to be a Javier to say, I'm going to shake things up, and I'm not going to just go along with the crowd. I'm going to be principled, and I'm going to make a change. And if, a lot of times I don't think that's the message that a lot of people running for office really try to sell, that plus, that I was really stressing the transparency and being like, no, I'm going to communicate. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm peeling back the curtain, so to speak, and I'm coming to you. I'm not going to be that politician that's the expectation is you always have to, come to the village meeting to find out what's going on. I just don't like that view, or just, again, that's just how it's always been done.
Can that work in America?
I can attest that it works on a local level. I think that it definitely probably gets harder the higher up you go. I mean, just as if you're in the Senate, at the state level, that you can hold town halls, which is great. And we have a really good liberty leaning guy here in Michigan. His name is Steve Cara. He's very much a Ron Paul libertarian, and I've been able to get to know him really well. And he does a lot of door knocking in his district, and he does the town halls, but it's at a much larger scale than I have to deal with. And so it does, I think it works, but it's diminished, the more constituents that you represent.
Because this last election cycle, I left it, if it's a thing, somewhat dejected, because I was trying to use my little soapbox to push the libertarian candidate and a libertarian message, and all I got was culture war bullshit back at me. And I'm explaining actual points about individual liberty, economics, and what the Libertarian Party stands for, and all I got back was, your candidate supports transgender kids. And it was the mindless dialogue, because libertarians tend to be a tad bit more sophisticated when it comes to social issues, more so than liberals or conservatives, because they get in their corner or in their vault and lock the vault door behind them, and there's no budging them. There's no dialogue. How does the Libertarian Party, starting at that local level, explain individual liberty in an aspect where it doesn't automatically force somebody to put up a wall?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the things that being locally elected gives you massive amount of street cred, especially with infighting with other libertarians, to say, or ex-libertarians or future libertarians, of, well, your party's doing this and your party stands for that and your candidate's an idiot. Or all of a sudden you can say, you know what, I'm an elected official, and here's what I deal with. And it really shuts the conversation down pretty quick, because they're, more often than not, they're just a keyboard warrior that it just likes to shit on people on social media. And if you can actually say, I hold this office, I was appointed to this committee, what have you done? And it shuts people up pretty quick. So if you want to win arguments, you definitely have to put your actions to where your mouth is. And that's, for me, I just got tired of bitching to my friends and other libertarians about the state of the world, or, local economy. Eventually I'm like, what am I actually doing about it? Because just complaining is not cutting it anymore. That's where, my buddy Andy and I started a podcast. I think that's almost a default now for, if you are a real libertarian, you should have a podcast.
That's it.
That's why I'm here.
That's why we're here. Most of my hosts, minus our part-time host, she comes on every blue moon, Abbins O'Brien. But other than her and myself, everybody else that hosts this podcast ran for office and put their ass where their mouth was, so to speak. They hit the street.
I think we could word that differently.
Yeah.
Ask the
Money where your
mouth.
mouth,
I like
money
that.
where your mouth is, feet to the pavement, something better
I
than
mean,
the
you
mouth.
got your ass off the couch, out of your chair, and went and knocked on people's doors.
Yeah. I just
This is who
you
I
said
am.
that.
I mean, I think there's a technical term for it, like one of those things you get money from. But that's neither here nor there. It amazes me that in this day and age of the duopoly, and like we like to say here on the Black Powder Podcast, the pendulum of stupidity, where people like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try the other guy that didn't work last time. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try. And I felt like the Libertarian Party failed miserably this last election cycle because it was a golden opportunity, not necessarily to win on the national level, but to make a mark on the national level, because America clearly did not like the choices when it was Brandon and Trump, and they liked it even less when it was Kamala and Trump. And I was thinking about this today. I think Trump won for the same reason he won in 2016. Democrats ran the absolute worst candidate that they could possibly find, that America just roundly hates. They hated Hillary and they hated Kamala. Why would you do that to yourself? It is insanity. And the Libertarian Party had a chance to say, hey, here we are, a viable choice, whether it was bringing JFK Jr. into the loop, who beat us, or Ella, like, you don't, no Republican has invited libertarians to speak, a real libertarian to speak at their convention and try to gain some cred by doing that. And I'm not knocking it. Maybe it was, I don't know the thought process behind it, so I'm not knocking it. But I do know this. We failed on the highest level in messaging to the American people, because the simple message that coming out of COVID, the lockdowns and all that stuff, we would have never done that to the American people. That should have been the first thing. The second thing is the economics behind it. We understand what that did to you, and libertarians have an economic message to you about individual liberty, free trade, and everything else along those lines. So with that being said, how do you think libertarians going forward can regain the momentum like we got 4 million votes with Gary Johnson?
The struggle is we don't have a very deep bench.
Yeah.
And, you know, even because last national convention was the first national convention that I attended. And even the people on the stage, the majority of them, I mean, we saw this with, was it Mike Tomat that, you know, just ran back to the Republican Party. They're not real libertarians. You know, they're using the mic and the spotlight to further themselves and their own careers. We have to have the people that you know, attend, you know, your state meetings and your affiliate meetings. We need real libertarians that are willing to step up and actually make a difference. You know, and that's, you know, what I try to push for is, you know, just for the village council, that's one meeting a month, unless there's, you know, special meetings. But the time commitment is not drastic. And what you can do, you can really make a difference. And, you know, maybe I do run for something bigger, you know, in a year or two, but now I have a resume. Now I have cred. Now I have respect. Right. And I can build on that. You know, libertarians have to get away from this, like, I'm going to run for governor, and then when I got 1%, everybody's patting me on the back. Like, that's not winning. Yeah. And then, you know, that's what we struggled in the state of Michigan with that. I mean, our state conventions, everybody would be so excited because the person who ran for the 6th time for Secretary of State got a 0.1% more this time around than they did last time around. That's just, you know, we have to be able to have real wins, and then we can point to, you know, those local races to say, look, in a small town, village, city, this person made a difference because they did X, Y, and Z. Now, can you imagine what we can do, at a state Senate level? So we almost need a proof of concept like a Javier Milei, maybe obviously not at his level, but man, if we could get a mayor and to say, look at this city, look at what libertarianism did for this city or village, or we need that proof of concept, because I think the Joe Schmo on the street thinks, the idea is that they're just going to throw their vote away. And it's in reality, it's actually, that's the case in most races.
So
I think we, real quick, I think we did get a mayor in Iowa.
Yeah, I think we do have in one area.
a couple years
it's a small
ago,
town.
Lily Wu in Wichita got
Yeah.
elected mayor. She's a registered libertarian, and I want to get her on the podcast or just have a conversation with her. But she was like a news broadcaster in the area. So she had the name recognition, popularity, and she distanced herself from the Libertarian Party at the time because they were such a crap show that it would have hurt her. But she's registered libertarian. I don't know if that race is partisan or not. Need to look into it. But that's a great point. Like, we need to find those people, like in your community, whatever your mayor is, find somebody that, we could, has a good name recognition and presence in the community that is libertarian in philosophy, convince them, hey, run as a libertarian or at least join the party. Like here in North Carolina, if you are nonpartisan, you can still, be a member of the Libertarian Party. You just got to sign the NAP, the oath or whatever, and you're still a delegate. So that might be a way here. I don't know how things are in your state, like running no party affiliated might work. I don't know.
Yeah, or there's, we actually had, I think it was a township seat. The townships, at least in Michigan, are partisan. So it was a split township, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and there was a vacant seat that they were looking to fill. And those kind of races, I think, would be a great in for a libertarian, especially because it would be an appointed position. And that, the Dems aren't going to want to appoint a Republican and vice versa, but maybe a libertarian, that's an easier win for us. And then all of a sudden you're in, you can make a difference. And then by the time, you're up and you have to, run again, people already, you built a brand. And those are the kind of races I'd love to see more targeted approaches to at the state level and even national level, is to say strategically, what can we win? Where do we have name recognition? Where do we have talented candidates? And let's throw our weight behind them and stop focusing so much on the president stuff.
So this is kind of a pivot to like your role and involvement at the state level and national level. And I get it. Comms isn't necessarily like candidate support, but is there a way where like local affiliates pass, make a list of, and maybe I know North Carolina kind of already does this. They have a spreadsheet of like the, I guess, more reasonable races that they think we could win strategically, and the types of candidates. Like, let's recruit some good candidates in those areas for those races, and let's get some support behind them. But is there a way where we could get some national and state downward support to the local affiliate level? Yeah, you know what I mean? Is that a good strategy? Like, let's
I think it is.
The right races, get the right people in those races, and then let's get some top-down support for the local candidates.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective, and I think states like, I would use like New Hampshire, for example, where they probably have a deeper bench of active members that can help with a lot of that work. I think in Michigan, we probably only have maybe 20 to 30 really active members. And when it comes to like day-to-day stuff, it's a lot even smaller than that. So really it comes down to, do we have the people that can do the work or help get the work done? And that's a kind of a state by state question. But I think in a perfect world, yeah, you've got a really, a large pool of people that are talented, that, man, I do graphic designs. If you're running like Tap Me, or hey, I have a great podcast with a huge reach. Hey, Tap Me. You get those type of people in your state, and you can really start to make an impact and really help local candidates visibility, and set them head and shoulders above the rest. It's not that hard. That's what I kind of stress to people. Like I said before, it's one meeting a month, and if you're used to Robert's rules, that's mostly what governs most meetings. It's not. I don't know if that's necessarily what's causing the libertarians that just don't want to run for offices that they can win, or if maybe it just hasn't been pushed like it has recently, thanks to the Mises Caucus. Of we're focused on local races, and we need to stop getting so carried up on the races that we're just not going to win. Not to say that those aren't still vehicles for messaging, because I think they are. But again, the idea of celebrating 1%, we got to leave those days behind us.
I want you to read here from one of our other hosts. He's my affirmative action hire. We got him from the special needs community. But I want you to read.
So he is the real libertarian.
Yeah. Well, what's up here? First problem is that people don't know who we are. Second problem, people know who we are, not our best examples.
Yeah, I mean it's a double-edged sword. I mean, again, we tend to be known because of our presidential tickets, and they have not been shining stars for some time, and you do have to wonder, why is that? Because that's the majority of the people that show up to conventions. They vote those people in. I mean, there's definitely shenanigans that go on, and backroom deals. I had front row seats to that in DC. But then you do have people like Dave Smith. You do have people that are saying the name libertarian and can kind of great messengers. I don't know if we burn them out, and or we get them so frustrated because of our infighting that they're like, peace out, I'm going to do my own thing. And that sucks. And I can't hate them for that, because there's days that I'm like, what the hell? Like, why are we our worst enemies? This is so effing ridiculous. But there are still times, like I said, when I win, like, no, we can make an impact. It's not.
That was me from December till about February. I was like, I'm done. I can't even believe how the Libertarian Party this. There's one thing about Herschel Walker that everybody wants to overlook besides his ineptitude. He used to fumble all the time, and that's what the Libertarian Party did. We just completely fumbled the ball. You can't expect to win on the national level. That's just plain and simple. But I thought we had that chance to get to the 5%, 5% to actually get the matching funds, or is it? I forgot, what is it? Is it 3, 5, or 7 to get?
I think they keep moving it up.
Yeah.
Every time the Libertarian gets close, they bump it up.
Okay, so we have this guy from Wexford County. Is that in Michigan? That sounds like Northeast. Oh, is that?
I think every state has a Wexford.
County? Let's see. Hey, who said that? J&J up north, Mitch. Which Wexford County?
Up northeast. Yeah, I guess that is.
It's got to be Michigan, right?
It sounds Old English to me, and I know because my son was in Wisconsin.
There's definitely one in Michigan, so that's the first one that popped up when I googled it. Wexford County in Michigan. So, what county are you in, Ben?
I'm Odessa County, or Odessa Township. It's Ionia County.
Yeah, only Odessa I know is in Texas.
I own you. That's what the government wants you to think, that they own you. Just kidding.
Then the scientific libertarian comes in and says, "No, you have a short memory when it comes to politics."
On my map here, it is kind of has Cadillac in it, Harrietta. It's kind of, if you're looking at the oven mitt, it's to the left side of the oven mitt, kind of south of Traverse City and Elk Rapids and the Grand
Okay, so
for
yeah,
the
that's up
first
north.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you Southern Michigan?
Yeah.
Like
I,
South Central, right?
Gotcha.
I'm right between Lansing and Grand Rapids.
All right. We have another comment here by our local DEIA coach, Tub Rohrbaugh. RPT, President of the United States candidate, should merely be for ballot access and overall party recognition. I can tend to concur with that. I kind of miss him coming up in here blabbering, saying that, waving his hands around like, he does like Kermit the Frog. Remember Kermit used to, that's tough to me. And I really miss it.
I would say, Tub, if you wanted to make comments, you should have been on the show tonight. But
indeed.
also, don't stop making comments. It's good for the algorithm. So it's a double-edged sword.
I want to switch gears real quick because the Libertarian Party is known for its pacifist approach and anti-war messaging. And today, this evening, we got some news that there was a Israeli strike against Iran. Details are still coming in, but this is a sensitive subject for a lot of people because we're in a time and place right now where a lot of Americans are picking sides in the Middle East conflict with the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I think this is a terrible time to expand on war. That's my personal opinion. This is not the professional opinion of the Black Powder podcast for our sponsors. But in my personal opinion, war is the worst of mankind. It's the worst thing we could do to each other because it involves killing people to impose your will on somebody else. And that unto itself is a disgusting concept in my book because I just, innocent people die because of powerful people. And these powerful people are not necessarily doing that for the innocent people because we wouldn't need these types of conflicts if people just fairly traded with each other and had a means of commerce, because this is a global economy now. That's how peace begets peace. It's through mutual beneficial economic transactions. And this whole, and I'm all for, you got to have your nation, you got to have your borders. Don't put me in that category. But what is there hasn't been a war of the 20th century that hasn't directly led to another war. And you could probably go back to the 19th and 18th century if you really wanted to delve a little deeper into that. So when you engage in war, all you're doing is, it's like the national debt. You're guaranteeing a war for your children's future. And so this is not something we should go into lightly. And I just wanted to get your opinion, and these are our personal opinions and whatnot, but what do you guys
think? If you could, well, Marcus, first off, I want to say, and I'm not going to say you misspoke, but you said pacifist. And I'm not saying that there aren't some libertarians that are pacifists,
right,
but I don't think we're necessarily pacifists.
I get it.
We just believe in the non-aggression principle, but most libertarians, and I'm going to speak from my perspective, and I'm going to speak for little here, Marcus, too. I think we totally believe in the use of force if you are aggressed upon in self-defense. Right. You know what I mean? Like, we totally understand and believe that. And I can't speak for everyone, but I do. And I think Marcus does. I don't know you well enough, but I'm assuming you might agree with that. But there is a difference. But, like, I'm a veteran of the Iraq War. It's a war that we never should have been in. It's a war that lasted way too long. We lost, one life was one too many. And there are still troops right now stationed in Iraq. A lot of people are like, oh, the war's over. Or, and I didn't go to Afghanistan, but same thing. That was a war that we didn't need to be in. Now, I'm not saying that, we shouldn't have pursued bin Laden, but I think there was a better way to do it. And Ron Paul had a great plan. use special forces immediately. We knew where he was at. We could have got him immediately, but they drug their feet. I digress. But what I totally agree with you. Like this, and I'm not trying to say like we should have all seen this coming. But what's the saying? Like, regardless who you vote for, you always get John McCain. There's too much power. There's too much influence from the military-industrial complex for us to not be at war with someone. And while they've been able to make their money, with war by proxy through Ukraine with Russia, I think those coffers are drying up a little bit because there's so much pushback against us continuing to be involved over there. What I'm asking the followers of this page is call your representatives and tell them we do not need war with Iran. Not now, not ever. It's none of our business unless they attack us on our soil. We do not need to be involved with war with Iran.
It will be very interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I just read, was it yesterday or even earlier today, Trump saying my entire administration is negotiating with Iran, and we are looking for peaceful means to make sure war does not happen. And clearly Bibi was, he's potentially facing jail time. He has to keep these wars going to keep his power and control, and that is a dangerous combination with somebody who has an arsenal of nuclear weapons undeclared. And it's a scary time. This can easily domino. Iran just signed that defense pact with Russia. If Bibi's successful in dragging us into war because some of our bases over there get hit, and then you got Russia, then you got China, boom, you're in a World War III scenario. And it's a scary time. It's also, I'm a firm believer that every war is a banker's war. And we are well overdue for a huge economic collapse because of the debt. And I think a lot of times war is used to paper over that debt. It's an excuse. And I think there's a lot of bankers that are just gleeful right now because spending's going to skyrocket, especially if we get dragged in, and we're going to see inflation just soar. And so we will pay for this war. We will pay for it in treasure. We will pay for it in blood. And man, I really hope cooler heads prevail.
Well, what's crazy is the next round of negotiations on the Iran nuclear deal were set for Sunday. So the timing of this is kind of wild. That, and knowing that the United States was supposed to sit down with Iran on Sunday in Qatar to talk about a deal, and then you preemptively go ahead and strike. And here's the thing to me: there is no possible way you could stop. If Iran wanted a bomb, you can't stop them because you could destroy all their external facilities, but the main heart of their nuclear program is in a mountain. And there's only one country on earth that has the capability of hitting that mountain, and that's the United States. And what's even crazier, to tie this in with Ukraine, the Ukraine war has shown and why they've been able to last this time without U.S. support is they're doing asymmetrical warfare with that drone strike 500 miles into Russia, where they sent trucks, and unbeknownst to the Russian truck drivers, they set up the attack. And that operation was probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the United States just, they're about to pass a $1 trillion defense budget. We're spending money on all these big weapons programs, and Ukraine destroyed roughly 1/3 of Russia's strategic bombers with $1,000 drones packed with explosives. The United States and its allies are headed in the wrong direction, and because they're not even prepared to fight this war that is Israel's kind of bringing to the table right now, because Iran is the Ukraine of the Middle East. They're not going to attack you with these big weapon systems like the Russians have. they're going to be using drones and missiles and things along that nature. And it's not going to be a ground war. Israel can invade Iran. The only state capable of invading Iran, Iraq tried it. They failed miserably, but it would be America. And America should not be involved in this whatsoever. This is not our fight.
I think more people are starting to realize that the purpose of war isn't to win, it's to perpetuate. I think, between the Korean War and the Afghanistan War and the Vietnam War, I mean, we've lost everyone, and we've dragged them on as long as possible. And as soon as one closes, like Afghanistan, boom, you've got Ukraine. So the money keeps flowing into the Pentagon that can't even scratch, even attempt an audit. And not only are we, keeping the budgets, but we are increasing. I mean, that is just, it is absolutely absurd. And it really should make, every American's blood boil that it's commonplace, and it's, corruption. I mean, that's one place that Doge never even was able to even get into the building.
That's one of my things, because Doge was conceptually one of the best ideas that the United States government has ever had. Unfortunately for me, I don't trust the United States government to tie my shoe. So I was always on the skeptical side, especially when, you're cutting money to the national parks, which is actually a revenue creating department. They actually bring in more money than they spend. And, if you're going to cut something that's bringing money into the coffers and just completely overlook a Pentagon that can account for $5 it spent, are you really doing some efficient work? And I have to say, for me, it started off on a wrong note when you had two people in charge of government efficiency. That makes zero sense to me, because how are you going to have Ramaswamy and Elon co-chairs of one? That is the most inefficient thing on the basic concept getting started. So I was like, okay, I'm going to wait and see. And then it wasn't impressive. I honestly can't say that they accomplished shit. And I don't know how much money they spent, how much they were paying these people, but you have to subtract that from what did it ended up being, 125 billion or whatever it was.
Well, it started super high, and
it's now down to, I think, 9.7 billion.
Yeah. So it's been nearly,
and the government spends that like twice in a day.
Well, I mean, the interest on the debt alone is every single day is more than that. And it is just amazing to me that, every election cycle, there's this eternal optimism that things are going to be better. And I get that. I'm an eternal optimist. But I don't understand how Americans think things can get better when you do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Everybody knows the definition of that concept and what it is. It's insanity that you think this time will be different, because, I'm not a big fan, and I tell them in the group chat all the time, I'm not a big fan of the guy in charge, because what happened to my kids during COVID, I'll never forgive him for that, because they suffered immensely. My son lost a year of baseball. My daughter was removed from her friends, and I saw it manifest in their personalities. At first they were like, oh, cool, no school. Then 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 10 months, a year.
It's still happening in California. Just kidding.
Hey, I just want to, yeah.
One of the things that was positive, I think, that came out of the COVID was the idea of nullification. And I think that's something that libertarians, especially locally elected libertarians, really should embrace is, right. There were sheriffs that said, I am not going to uphold these laws. They are unconstitutional. And they let businesses stay open under, extreme pressure. But the idea that we can give the middle finger to even state governments to say, fuck off, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
That was a powerful message. And we really should hold on to that as libertarians to say, it only takes a few people in a certain area that can say no, that's unconstitutional and that will not be enforced here.
What sucked in LA County, I don't live in LA County. The LA County is about 3 miles north of me. But and I don't have a problem with this. The weed dispensaries were called critical, essential businesses, but they closed down gun and ammunition stores
and churches,
and simultaneously were releasing prisoners from county jail that even had violent crimes. So you can get high, but if you don't have a few hundred rounds of ammo to properly protect yourself, because if you don't have a few hundred rounds per firearm, America, you're not ready to protect yourself because you're not that great of a shot. I guarantee you that. But with that being said, people were praising these people for taking care of us. And I'm like, how are you taking care of us when you're releasing criminals? They can go get high and make bad decisions and come to your house. And there was a mad rush. I hadn't seen this since Obama got elected. There was a rush on gun stores, people buying firearms here in California and leading up to that stuff. And then they started shutting down the gun stores. So it goes to the point, and one of the things where I think libertarians need to actually step up the messaging. This is the government that cares about itself, no matter who's in charge. The Libertarian Party aims to change that perception and bring forth a new era of individual liberty where you are actually able to economically provide for yourself, to properly be able to defend yourself from government ineptitude and basic life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
no, go ahead,
go
Bear.
ahead. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, that's, what's I think scary is you had all of those anti-Dodge protests by thousands of people saying, no, we don't want the fraud and abuse cut. And that level of like insanity that it's cult like behavior of the worship of the state. And there's a reason for that. That is the desire, I think, for the state is to level itself up to a godlike entity where people are like, they're crying because the person didn't get elected and they're saying my life's over. Like, what in the world? That level of delusion is crazy.
It's public education. Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, those people, a lot of those people are, in or around DC. The entire economy of DC depends on big government, which that's the problem. There's so many people dependent on the state for their careers and their livelihood. And it goes outside like the greater DC area, like Maryland, Virginia. You know what I mean? That area right there. Like imagine if those people, and that is one thing that did happen, is like Doge sent out these like, hey, we're offering a early retirement severance package for government employees. Specifically, I know with the Department of Defense, a lot of people are like, hey, look, here's an opportunity to retire early. I don't know if y'all know how military retirement works, but like your big three is what your retirement depends on. And it's basically an average of your top 3 highest paying years while you retired. And then it's like a percentage of that basically. So, but I'm just saying, like, there was some of that happening, trying to urge some of those people. But do you think all of them, when they retire, they're going to uproot and leave the DC area? That's probably not their plan. That would be my plan if I was stuck living there for 20 years working with the government.
Area, though.
That's my thing. I was like, I don't, the cost of living there is astronomical. Housing market, ridiculous. You know what I mean? A studio apartment's $500,000. You know what I mean? So,
that Virginia area around DC is one of the wealthiest areas in the United States.
Yeah, Maryland too. That Annapolis area, all the way up to Annapolis, and all of that.
It's all defense contractors.
Yeah. my niece works for the DOD, and I had a chance to visit with her back in May, and I was like, "What's the mood in Virginia?" She said it's very somber. She's a die-hard Republican. She's 100% in with Trump and always has been. Because I talked to her about it. I always tell her, "You're way too smart to fall for the duopoly," and she's like, "Yeah, but that's the way I was raised." And then you look at all these Americans that go to public schools, and full disclosure, I work for a school district, but from the time they step foot on a public school campus, they're taught to line up and obey. They're taught to don't question the government or authority. This is what you're here to do. You're here to learn what we want you to learn. And we're going to judge you by the way you recite back what we tried to teach you. And one of the most profound things, she was 17 years old at the time, my daughter told me when she was about to graduate from high school. She's like, I figured out high school my first semester, my freshman year. All you have to do is tell the teacher what they want to hear. And I was like, she was probably 14, 15 at the time, and she figured that out on her own because
she saw behind the curtain.
Yeah. All I told her was look at everything, analyze everything, and ask questions after you use the tool in your hand, the most powerful tool known to mankind, because knowledge is the most powerful weapon. And they've had smartphones since they were in junior high. And so I was like, you shouldn't be asking me any specific questions. We should have discussions on what you researched. And because if you have a question on why is the government like the way it is, you could go on your phone and start asking that question, and the whole world is at your fingertips. But public education, from its inception, was created to make good workers and mindless drones. And that's one of the things the Libertarian Party, I think, can especially be effective with in messaging, is we need to change public education to where it is actually creating entrepreneurs or blue collar workers, or if you're going to college, you go on a college track through high school. This whole idea that everybody goes to college, everybody needs to be put in this line. It goes back to this picture. It was like a meme that I saw where the assignment was to climb a tree, and there was different animals assigned that assignment. There was a monkey, giraffe, elephant, snake, armadillo, a lion. How many of those animals can complete that assignment naturally? About half of them. The other half are just not going to get up that tree. And that's what our public education is. It's trying to make all these different animals climb a tall tree, and it's just simply not feasible in the information age, in the modern age, with AI coming into the fray.
So Ben, we've surpassed 1 hour, but before we close, to get back into your position, village council trustee, is that how many years is that term, and are there terms? Will you be term limited?
Yeah, so it follows the presidential cycle. So it's
Okay.
every 4 years, and there is no term limits. I know there's been a few people on the village council that have been in there for quite some time. You know, to kind of wrap that up on local elections, I really just challenge people, look into, see what's open. Start with an appointed position, get your feet wet, make a difference. Put your actions where your mouth is. We got to get off of our keyboards and start making a difference. And, you can do that within the Libertarian Party. I mean, Lord knows we need the help. We need the lift. So get involved in your local affiliates, and, jump on a podcast. There's a lot of things you can do even outside of, holding public office, but we got to do things. We got to stop just talking and fighting. We need to make an effort to actually make a difference.
And not to jump the gun here, but do you plan on running for re-election in 4 years? I know it's a little early, but is it ever really too early to start planning for your reelection?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely. I will be running for reelection. There's a chance I may run for village president. For the village of Lake Odessa. That person's been in that seat for, man, I think well over 10, maybe 20 years. And I see some opportunity to shake things up even more at a higher level locally in a position like that. So there's a lot of opportunities out there. I've gotten more and more connections through the Libertarian Party in the Lansing area for state representatives, and it's all learning. Like everything is, and if you don't, I think most libertarians, we like to dig into things and we like to figure out how things work. And local politics is a great way to start on that journey, and you never know where it's going to take you.
So how much more competitive would that president race be?
Oh, much higher league, and that would be even one that I would never be able just to jump in. And so that's a perfect example. Like I couldn't do that at a local village president level, and the fact that we're trying to do that at the governorship or the Secretary of State, it's just beyond stupidity. And so, but that's where, again, I'm building my brand. I'm showing people that I'm doing things differently, and that sets me up for kind of whatever I want to do next.
Work. I just want to put this out there because we reached out to Elon last week after that TIFF and said, you have a home with the Libertarian Party. Elon, I'm still waiting to get my message back from you on X when I said, hey, the Libertarian Party is all for Doge and the cutting the government. That's the only party in America that truly believes in that principle. And it's the only party, if given the opportunity, would enact that principle. So, Elon, I know you're listening. I know you're watching, so get back to me. Yeah, get back to me, homie. I'm right here. We fellow African Americans. I don't even know why you bullshitting, homie. Let's go. So,
right.
in closing, how can people find more about Ben DeJong?
That's a pretty good hybrid.
So
you can find me on X and on Instagram. I go by the handle Picture This 1979. I do a lot of photography on Instagram. Check out the We Love the State podcast. We record at least one podcast a week. We're trying to getting back into that after my co-host had some change up in jobs. So we're kind of reinvigorating that. If you're in Michigan, feel free to give me a buzz if you want to learn more about the Libertarian Party. I'd love to get you plugged in. But anywhere else, just again, I can't stress it enough. Stand up and do something about what's happening in the world today.
Awesome. Eric, what are your closing remarks?
Yeah, great time tonight, Ben. Good getting to know you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you could do us a favor and reach out to the other elected people in Michigan you know of and see if they'd be interested to come on, and have them reach out to one of the two of us. Find me on X at EricP904 or Facebook it's Eric Parker Bold Liberty. Send them our way if you can, please.
I will do that for sure.
Right. And shout out to We Love the State podcast. That's his boy. That's what's up. I would expand on Eric's point. I would ask you if you could reach out to on a national level, because I feel like, people like you, people like us, we have to be the voice of the next generation of media for the Libertarian Party, because the national media has its presence and they're just going to do the duopoly. It's the alternate media like the Black Powder podcast, We Love the State podcast. Those are the people that are going to reach out to the next generation of voters, because this generation coming up, they don't even have cable TV anymore. Their news source is YouTube and memes and podcasts and things of that nature. So this is the media that is going to make the difference. Specifically, and I'm not trying to undercut your podcast, because we'll bring you in, we'll share your stuff, and we're not haters. But the Black Powder podcast is, I think we're in the top 10 in premier libertarian podcasts, and I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying that because we have guests like you and several others. You're pretty cool because you're leading into Spike Cohen next week. So I want to extend my great appreciation to you coming on, and I want to tell the American people, give the Libertarian Party a chance, because to quote Trump, what do you have to lose? I mean, and that's a real statement coming from a real libertarian, and I will call you guys honorary real libertarians today. You have that for about another 5 hours Pacific time in my Ebonics specific time.
Specific times
until midnight. You guys are both real libertarians till midnight tonight, and I want to congratulate you on that honor that I have bestowed upon you, and thank you very much. Ben, was there anything else you wanted? I'll let you have the closing remark, and then we'll do our little piece out.
No, I really appreciate the platform, being able to chat with you guys. I'd love to come back anytime you guys have questions about whether it's libertarian issues or local races, or even if you just want to shoot the shit. Again, it's a scary time that we're living in, but it's podcasts like this that give me hope. So thank you both.
Thank you for coming on.
I want to give this sound effect to my people in LA. Y'all stay out the streets. The feds ain't effing around. Stay off the streets, homie. Let's stop burning up other people's shit. Do not destroy other people's stuff because of the federal government. Get involved in the political process and do this the right way. We have a chance to change the system, but if you keep electing the same people, you can't change shit. And with that being said, this is the Black Powder Podcast. I'm Marcus Matthews, the only real libertarian. Thank you to Eric Parker, Bold Liberty. Special shout out to our guest tonight, Ben DeJong.
However,
whatever your death name is. But as always, we always leave you with these words: the motto of the state of New Hampshire, but should be the motto of America: live free,
or die.